This is Principles of Management, and this session is on organizational culture. Culture is about things that are assumed to be true, embedded notions about what is right and wrong, about the correct way to do things. And I was thinking last Thanksgiving, my family had a lovely meal. There was a turkey put out on the table, displayed in the middle. It was very nicely dressed and garnished, and the centerpiece was surrounded by vegetables, starches, and other goodies that made up the focus of the feast. It was interesting because a few nights earlier, my wife and I had had dinner with a couple of friends at a restaurant. Dinner was served on plates that were assembled and brought out from the kitchen. Putting a meal on display for Thanksgiving seems perfectly natural, but it's not the only way to serve a meal. In my family, we assume that displaying the food at the center of the table is the way serving a meal should be done. But that's just a habit we acquired over time. We value the food and are thankful for its preparation, but the assumption is that everyone will serve themselves and pass things along. To have the family meal at our home is staged like a meal served in a restaurant. Now, that would be inconceivable. That's not the right way to do that. Is it right or wrong? It's relative. There are assumptions about the way we do things. Several authors studied organizations from the perspective of commonly held beliefs of their members and the beliefs they had about the outside world and about themselves. In the words of Edgar Schein in 1993, culture refers to those elements of a group or an organization that are most stable and the least malleable. Culture, he felt, was the result of a complex group of learning processes that is influenced only in part by leaders' behavior. Cultural patterning is defined by striving toward an integration of knowledge with behavior. It's determined both by cultural predisposition and by the situational contingencies that arise from the immediate environment. In brief, it considers how firms adapt to and respond to their environments. The same issue was considered by Scott Cook and Dvorna Yanow in 1993, who outlined a cultural perspective on organizational learning as a complement to the cognitive perspective offered by Schein. In the words of Cook and Yanow, groups acquire know-how. Just as the ability to perform symphonies is meaningfully attributed to a group, so is the possession of know-how necessary to do so. This is the essence of organizational learning. One aspect of the human capacity is the ability to act in groups, and a group of people with a history of joint action and practices can meaningfully be understood as having a culture. Organizations are constantly involved in modifying or maintaining their cultures. On this point, Harrison Trice and Janice Bayer studied the process of organizational change. Cultural change involves a break with the past and is inherently disequilibrating. Cultural change falls into three categories. 1. Revolutionary, comprehensive efforts to change the culture of an organization. 2. Efforts contained largely to changing specific subcultures or subunits within an organization. And 3. Efforts that are gradual and incremental, but nonetheless culminate in a comprehensive reshaping of an entire organization's culture. A simplified model of this change process begins with the adoption of a decision to make some change in the organization, something that is followed by implementation and then institutionalization. In 1990, Peter Senge wrote a seminal article titled "The Fifth Discipline: A Shift of Mind." In this article, he described the concept of systems thinking, namely, conceiving of relationships rather than linear cause-effect chains, and seeing processes of change rather than snapshots of it. Systems thinking is about seeing entireties rather than fragments, about viewing people as active participants in shaping their reality rather than simply reacting to it. Human participants in an organization are part of the feedback mechanism rather than standing apart from it, and so they share in the responsibility for problems and successes generated by a system. Also, by their nature, systems seek stability, which gives us one of the key lessons of balancing loops and delays, that aggressive action often produces exactly the opposite of what it is intended to do. At the end of this line of research, a few theorists who have reconceptualized the nature and purpose of the firm are whom we are going to talk about. John Mayer and Brian Rowan, 1977, took a societal perspective of the firm and noted that much of its organizational structure is driven by the expectations that society has. What are the elements of a credible firm? Does it have a website, a customer service center, an email address? Would you suspect it of not being legitimate if one or more of these aspects was absent from it? Jeremy Pfeffer, who we cited before, wrote an article with Gerald Salazek in 1978, expanding the discussion of the environmental influences of the firm. To understand the behavior of the organization, they argued, you must understand the context of its behavior, the ecology of the organization. Glenn Carroll and Michael Hannon, 2000, furthered this argument and classified environmental factors into 4 categories. 1. Those affecting the company's resources. 2. Political forces. 3. Technological changes. And 4. Changes in ethnic identity. Of these, the fourth begs explanation. It refers to changes in the distributions of socially constructed identities in human populations. The demographic makeup of these markets change over time. For example, the workforce in the U.S. has gone from being a male-dominated to a balanced one over the last 40 years. It has become increasingly well-educated, and more. Another writer, R. Edward Freeman, is credited with making popular the word stakeholder, something that refers to the principal actors in the external and internal environments of the firm. And this is a concept that will come up frequently in Mary Baldwin. This concludes the series of lectures on the principal contributors to the development of management theory. This list is not exhaustive, and many of the great management theorists were not included simply for the sake of brevity. The intent of this series was merely to provide an overview of some of the principal management concepts over the last several centuries and to familiarize you with the names of some of the contributors to this great body of knowledge. In the next section, we are going to cover the environment and culture. Have a good evening.